Welcome back to the channel. Today we're unlocking the dark side of Maryland. I'll admit, I thought this would be a simple episode. Maryland has Civil War history. I expected a few standard battlefield ghosts and some historic haunts. I was wrong. It turns out Maryland's dark history runs incredibly deep. Today, we aren't just exploring a legendary, blood-soaked battlefield. We're uncovering a cemetery statue so genuinely cursed it had to be hidden away in a museum. And we're traveling to a remote peninsula to see the most haunted lighthouse in the country. A place with a history that will absolutely give you chills. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one. Antietam, battlefield, the bloodiest day in American history. Let's start with some numbers, because in this story, numbers matter. September 17th, 1862. One single day, one single battle. In one day, 23,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or went missing. To put that into perspective, that is more American casualties than the entire War of 1812, more than D-Day, more than any other single day of combat in the history of the United States military. Before the sun set on that fateful afternoon, 23,000 human beings had been shot, stabbed, blown apart, or left to die in the fields of Sharpsburg, Maryland. And that ground, those fields, those lanes, that creek, absorbed every single drop of it. The Battle of Antietam was a turning point. General Robert E. Lee launched his first invasion of the North, and the Union Army moved to stop him. They collided near a quiet creek called Antietam. The fighting was savage. The stakes, enormous. President Lincoln was desperately waiting for a victory so he could issue the Emancipation Proclamation. The Confederates were desperate to prove they could win on Northern soil, so they fought. For one brutal, relentless, catastrophic day. When the guns finally fell silent, the fields were covered in the dead and dying for as far as the eye could see. The bodies were so numerous that burial details worked for days. Men were thrown into shallow graves right where they fell. Some graves were so thin that heavy rains exposed skeletons for years afterward. The land wasn't just a witness to death, it was saturated with it. Today, Antietam is a beautifully maintained national battlefield. You can drive through it, walk the trails, and stand on the very ground where those men perished. But many who visit, tourists, history buffs, everyday families, leave with experiences they cannot explain. The most common phenomenon, sound. Specifically, the phantom echoes of war, distant cannon fire, the crack of musket shots. On quiet afternoons with absolutely no reenactments scheduled, visitors hear artillery blasting from empty fields. Even the park rangers have stories. One ranger, who worked at Antietam for over 15 years, was patrolling the northern cornfield, a place of unimaginable slaughter. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a massive volley of musket fire from across the field. It was close. It was startling. He slammed on his brakes and scanned the area. The field was completely empty. Clear skies. No wind. No people. He sat there for a full minute, listening to the dead silence. He later said it was the clearest thing he ever couldn't explain. But the most haunted destination on the battlefield is a sunken farm lane. During the conflict, Confederate soldiers used this road as a natural trench. It was worn down below the level of the fields by years of wagon traffic. Cover was good. The position seemed secure until the Union Army found an angle. They flanked the position, got directly above the road, and fired straight down into the ditch. The men below had nowhere to run. They were trapped in a funnel of fire. The slaughter was so swift and so absolute that the road earned a new name, Bloody Lane. Today, those who walk it report an overwhelming emotional weight, a sudden, crushing sadness that lifts the moment you step off the path. But worse are the figures. In the fall of 2019, a group of hikers saw a line of men in Confederate uniforms walking toward them from the far end of the lane. Assuming they were historical reenactors, the hikers kept walking. Then, without breaking stride, the soldiers simply vanished. The hikers were left standing on a completely empty road. They later noted that the most terrifying part wasn't the disappearance. It was how utterly real the dead looked, right up until the moment they were gone. Then there is Burnside Bridge, a stone crossing where men died by the hundreds in the water. Today, it is a hotspot for anomalous photography. Visitors taking photos at dawn or dusk often find figures standing on the bridge or wading in the water that were absolutely not there when the camera clicked. It is one of the most well-documented photographic phenomena in paranormal history. Antietam is a place everyone should visit, not just because it's haunted, though it is deeply, but because standing on that ground forces you to understand the true cost of history. Just be prepared, because when you stand on that soil, the ground might just have something to say to you. Black Aggie, the statue that had to be removed. Our second story is one of my absolute favorites. It follows a chilling pattern we've seen before, like the Black Angel of Iowa, but this tale takes us somewhere even darker. This is the story of Black Aggie. Just like her sister statue in Iowa, Black Aggie was a cemetery monument with a curse so severe, so well documented in its consequences, that officials finally said, enough. In 1967, the statue was physically ripped from the ground and hauled away. But here's the terrifying part. The statue left, but the nightmare didn't. So what exactly was Black Aggie? I given some wife. Originally, she was a bronze funerary monument, a hooded, seated female figure placed over the grave of General Felix Agnus in Maryland's Druid Ridge Cemetery. Almost immediately after she was installed, the rumors began, and the rules of Black Aggie were passed down in whispers for decades. They said that anyone who met her bronze gaze at midnight would instantly go blind. Anyone brave enough to sit in her lap overnight would be crushed to death by arms that came alive in the dark. It was even said that the spirits of the dead would gather around her at night, drawn to a dark energy radiating from the metal. Now, how much of this is just campfire folklore? That's hard to say. But what isn't hard to say is what actually started happening at that grave. For decades, local college fraternities used Black Aggie for hazing rituals. Pledges were forced to spend the night sitting in her lap or look her in the eyes at the stroke of midnight. And things went wrong, while the fraternities kept the exact details quiet. Local news reports from the 1950s through 1970s tell a grim story. Young men were repeatedly found near the statue in states of extreme psychological distress. Some required immediate medical attention. Fed up with the trespassing, the trauma, and the unexplained incidents, the general's family made a choice. They donated Black Aggie to the Smithsonian Institution. She was packed up, moved to Washington, D.C., and locked away in storage. The statue was gone. Only an empty stone pedestal remained. Logically, The activity should have stopped. The focus of the curse was gone. The energy should have dissipated. It didn't. To this day, visitors who approach that empty stone platform report the exact same phenomena. The overwhelming feeling of being watched. Pockets of unnatural, bone-chilling cold. A malevolent presence, rooted to the bare stone. In 2018, a paranormal research team visited the empty site. They swept the entire cemetery, but their equipment went haywire in only one spot. The highest, most consistent EMF spikes didn't come from the graves or the other monuments. They came from the empty air directly above Black Aggie's old pedestal. During the investigation, one researcher decided to recreate the old fraternity dare. She sat down on the empty stone platform. After just 2 minutes, she was hit by a wave of pure terror. It wasn't a thought or a choice. It was a physical, overwhelming compulsion to run. The moment she stepped off the stone, the feeling vanished. She sat back down to test it. Instantly, the dread returned. Whatever Black Aggie was, whatever she attracted or contained, she didn't leave when they hauled the bronze away. The pedestal remembers. As for Black Aggie herself, she is currently on display in a courtyard at the National Museum of American Art, out in the open, in the broad daylight. And the museum staff who work in that courtyard, well, they have their own stories to tell, but that is an episode for another day. Point Lookout Lighthouse. The most haunted lighthouse in America. Our last story takes us to the edge of the world, and I want you to really focus on the history here. Because the history is the key to everything. Once you understand what happened at Point Lookout, the haunting stops being a surprise. It becomes almost inevitable. Point Lookout is the southernmost tip of Maryland. It's a long, narrow peninsula jutting out into the Chesapeake Bay, surrounded by water on 3 sides. It is remote, windswept, and beautiful, in a harsh, unforgiving way. In 1830, a lighthouse was built on this lonely point. It stands today as the oldest lighthouse on the bay, but between 1863 and 1865, this beautiful peninsula became the site of one of the most concentrated pockets of human suffering in American history. During the Civil War, Point Lookout was transformed into a Union prisoner of war camp. At its peak, it crammed over 52,000 Confederate prisoners into a facility built for maybe 10,000. The conditions were catastrophic. The prisoners lived in ragged tents on the open ground. No shade in the blazing summers, almost no protection from the brutal, freezing winter gales. Food rations were deliberately withheld as a matter of policy. Medical care did not exist. The water supply was poisoned with disease. Smallpox, scurvy, and dysentery ran rampant. Men died every single day. Estimates put the death toll between 3,000 and 8,000 men in just 2 years. Others believe the true number is much higher, but the record-keeping was poor. Some were buried in shallow graves. Others were dumped into mass trenches, whose exact locations remain a secret to this day. Thousands of men, far from home, died on that freezing dirt, staring out at the water that separated them from everything they loved. After the war, the prison camp was dismantled and the lighthouse keepers moved back in. And almost immediately, every single keeper reported the exact same nightmare. Voices. For over 150 years, this is the consistent thread. Voices echoing inside the lighthouse. Multiple male voices. Talking, murmuring, and occasionally shouting from empty rooms. In the late 1800s, one keeper officially documented in his logbook that he was repeatedly awakened by a group of men arguing directly outside his bedroom door. Every time he opened the door, there was no one there. The hallway was empty, but he noted something specific in his official log. The phantom voices had a distinct southern drawl. Think about that. Long before ghost hunting was a trend, and before electronic voice phenomena was even a concept, a government employee officially logged that he was being kept awake by the ghost of southern men. In the decades since, Point Lookout has become one of the most extensively researched paranormal sites in America. And the audio evidence captured here is some of the most chilling ever recorded. In the 1980s, paranormal researchers teamed up with Maryland state officials to conduct massive audio sweeps of the Lighthouse. What they caught on tape was extraordinary. Dozens of distinct male voices. Voices that answered questions. Voices that gave names. Voices with speech patterns and vocabulary consistent with mid-19th century Southern English. During one session, a researcher looked into an empty room and asked, "How many of you are here?" The microphone picked up a clear, gravelly whisper. It said, "Not enough room." In another session, an investigator heard heavy footsteps right behind her. She turned. No one was there. She asked aloud, "Who's there?" The tape captured a single immediate word: "Me." When a non-paranormal state archivist was brought in to review the tapes for historical data, she confirmed the authentic Civil War era dialects. When asked if she had a logical explanation for the recordings, she simply said, "No." But the peninsula holds another secret. It isn't just the soldiers who refuse to leave. There is also the woman. The most frequent visual apparition at Point Lookout is a woman in a long, flowing dress. She is seen gliding down the stairs, pacing the keeper's quarters, or standing on the shore, staring out at the waves. Some think she was a keeper's wife. Others believe she was a desperate mother who came to the prison camp looking for her son and never left. But unlike the chaotic energy of the soldiers, she is gentle. Every account describes an overwhelming sadness, but never a threat. She behaves like someone who is waiting for a reunion that never happens. One investigator, after years of visiting the lighthouse, finally saw her standing in the shadows of the keeper's quarters. She described a feeling of crushing sorrow. But as she watched, the figure looked back at her with an expression of pure recognition, like she was finally grateful to be seen. Today, Point Lookout Lighthouse is open for tours. You can go there. You can stand on that narrow strip of land and look at the water where 52,000 men suffered. It is a place that demands respect, because the men who died there were real. Their pain was real, and their voices, still calling out into microphones on the edge of the Chesapeake Bay, 160 years later, those are real too. Three places, one state, and honestly, Maryland delivered in a way I never expected. Think about what we uncovered today, where 23,000 human beings became casualties in a single catastrophic day. A place where soldiers are still seen marching down Bloody Lane, and where the soil itself carries the crushing weight of the past. A cemetery statue that collected so much malevolent energy over the decades, it had to be ripped from the earth. Yet, the empty pedestal left behind is still perfectly capable of driving people away in pure terror. And Point Lookout, where the desperate voices of men who died in a prison camp are still being recorded, still answering questions, still demanding to be heard. Maryland is a state deeply, specifically connected to the bloodiest chapter of American history, and the hauntings reflect that. This isn't the kind of darkness that comes from campfires or folklore. This is documented history. Real events. Real people. Their stories matter far beyond the ghost story layer. If you have ever been to Antietam, to Druid Ridge Cemetery, or to Point Lookout, tell me in the comments. I want to hear what you experienced. If this episode got to you, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We have a lot more states to cover. And next video is going to be unforgettable. Take care of yourselves, everyone, and if you ever find yourself on a lonely peninsula in Maryland, surrounded by water on 3 sides, and you hear the murmuring of men's voices with no logical source, they just want someone to know they were there. Say something back.